my dad is making it hurt.
So, but for people who do not know you, you introduce yourself to them.
Sure. Hi, I'm Anand. I say that I'm a creative technologist and entrepreneur, which is just a jibber jabber, meaning that I like to use technology, but also design and creativity and like kind of build digital products.
And what do you do right now, and where are you going in a month?
So right now, I recently founded a Koi, which is a Swiss interior as a service company, which is really weird because my last company was a software as a service company. So this is the first time I've done like real world products. But so we do rental furniture, but with interior design. So imagine you get a new apartment. It's an empty apartment. You want to get furniture. So what are your options? You would either get like shitty IKEA furniture, spend a couple $1,000,
Or go to
and then it's gonna
Craigslist.
break in like a month, or get really bad stuff, right? Or you could get really good stuff, like from a good retailer, like with really high quality wood and so on. And then your 2-room apartment might cost you $20,000 up front, which you don't have, of course. So what we do is we kind of combine it. So we do rental apartments, but like the furniture part.
Apartment furniture.
Exactly. So you cannot like get a sofa for $20 a month. What you can do is say, this is my floor plan. Our professional interior designers would design the entire apartment for you. So we ask you a lot of questions like, what styles do you like? Do you live with someone? Do you work from home? And then for you, somebody actually designs the whole apartment, and we give you all the furniture in it, and you pay, let's say, $300 a month.
Okay. And is this furniture used? In the sense, if I get a new set of interiors for my drawing room, what are the chances that somebody else might have used it before me?
So right now, 0%.
Yeah, but
But
over time.
eventually the idea is that we want to have 2 cycles for each item. Because also like with IKEA stuff, right? You basically cannot ever reuse it.
Yes.
Because once you put it out, like even because of the new stuff, it's like super complicated. But the point is, it's not going to be usable anyway by the time you're done with it. And that has a really big environmental impact, right? IKEA is the world's largest wood consumer, period. And that's not very sustainable, right? You don't want to have... It's what IKEA is called fast fashion, right? We know fast fashion with H&M and Zara. Take that forward and say fast furniture. That's what IKEA is doing, right? We want to sell as much as possible, as quickly as possible, and then have
And
new
don't
stuff
care
ASAP.
about what happens after
Right.
that.
And what we're trying to do is give you really high quality stuff, like handcrafted wood, really good stuff, which you can use for like 10, 20 years. You know, like the kind of table that your grandfather had, which is perfect after 20 years. We're giving you that. And let's say you have a 3-year subscription, and then you move out or you go back to India or whatever, you just stop the subscription and then we take everything back, and that's it. You stop paying. So for people, it's really good.
Yeah.
Obviously, like if your rent is $1,000 a month, for $1,300 you get
a proper
imagine like an
furnished
Airbnb, like a beautiful apartment. You get that versus like a
like scrappy furniture that
from
you would
IKEA,
get if
which
you're
is like
moving
which
out.
you have to assemble yourself, and like you like
and
I
don't look good.
yeah, it looks horrible, but it feels horrible. Like my first 2-3 years in the Netherlands, of course, I was using IKEA furniture, and obviously I can never do it exactly properly, so it always wiggles a little because I assemble it and not a professional person, because I don't want to pay $200 for assembly. So, but with Koi, like we try to make it like
So
good.
do you guys assemble the furniture?
Everything end to end.
And how long does it take to get the cost of the furniture back? Like your initial investment back?
So it's interesting because we didn't want to... Yeah, so that's a really good question, because the first challenge we had before we even did anything was, how do we pay for this shit?
Yes,
right?
because it's already
If
expensive.
I'm spending $20,000 up front per apartment for a subscription over 2 years who's giving me $300 a month, like I don't... Like it never works
it doesn't
around.
make sense that there's no economic
And also,
sense.
how do we raise money, right? No investor wants to give me millions of dollars so that
buy
I can buy a
furniture
lot
for
of
100
furniture.
users.
And even if I do raise $1 million, like I could sustain it for 10 apartments, 20, 100 apartments, but then what happens after that, right? For every user, I cannot spend a quarter of 100K. But anyway, so we tried to do a lot of brainstorming, and then we went to banks and tried to get a credit line. But banks don't want to give you credit because furniture is not considered an asset.
Yes.
You can get credit for a car, which doesn't make sense, but not for furniture.
I think because cars can be resold
Furniture
comparatively
can be
easily,
resold.
comparatively easily, and they do not lose much value compared to furniture.
I don't know if that's the case actually. So I think there's
But
this.
let's not digress.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry for the question.
No, but also with furniture, I think it's an interesting point. Like there is this, if you draw up kind of a graph of resale value, you would actually, you can make the case that getting a BMW is a horrible deal, right? Getting a really cheap car is a better deal, right? But getting a super premium car like an Aston Martin is actually also a really good deal, because the resale value is so much that getting a super premium Tesla is actually saving more money than getting a cheaper car.
Yes.
You can make that case.
Yes.
Which also happens with luxury products like Swiss watches or Prada sunglasses or really high quality furniture. So if you have really good furniture, the resale value is fairly close to the original value. If you have IKEA stuff, if you
Then
buy something, it's obviously zero. As soon as, like, even when it's not assembled, it's already zero. Which is what happens if you buy a mid-range car. The second you buy a car, it's already like 6 years, 80% value over, right? That's not the case with if you buy a really fancy car. Anyway, digression over. So eventually what we figured out after a lot of work is kind of our secret sauce, which is called factoring. Factoring means we go to a company and we say, hey, we have this apartment for $20,000. We have this contract for 3 years. The contract value is $20,000 over 3 years, let's say, right? So the factoring company says, okay, I believe you. This is a legal contract. You need this furniture. We will take 10% up front. So that's $2,000. And they would give us the $18,000 up front. So now I get...
is like finance.
Exactly,
it's
like
a bank.
financing. It's
like
like
a
bank.
private bank.
Yeah, it's like a financial service. Except then all of the monthly payments then go to the factoring company.
Oh.
We get our money up front.
Oh.
Minus their commission.
So for you... But how did you make money then?
So because obviously if my subscription contract is for 20,000, my actual furniture cost is around 15,000. Minus factoring 2,000, I end up with, let's say, 3,000 upfront versus over 3 years, which the factoring company will be paid back. And then also, people don't always move out from their apartment after 3 years. So after that factoring contract is over, third year onward, all of my monthly recurring subscriptions start coming in also.
And what part of this is automated? So I've seen your website, so you can go in and you can fill in your details of your apartments. I think you can also upload floor plans.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff you can do. And this is really interesting because we started with complete, like, no automation at all. We got some really smart girls from Ukraine who are interior designers, and we paid them per project. And we would actually call the customer, ask them a lot of questions for half an hour. My co-founder would do that. And then have, like, I made this little sales app where he could on the phone, like, quickly enter all the questions, like a script, and then write the answers and so on. And then we would automatically send that to the interior designers who would then manually design each apartment. And then we would send them a proposal.
Okay.
That's what we've been doing so far. That changed this month. So for the past couple months, we had been working on the secret site project, which is kind of what our core IP is now, which has automated everything end to end for sure.
Okay.
And the most interesting part there is with the renders. So the difference between, like, going to IKEA.com and buying furniture is e-commerce experience, right? You see the items. What we do is we give you a personalized apartment. So what we actually do is give you photorealistic renders, like you cannot distinguish whether that's a photograph or not.
Of my home?
Exactly your apartment. Based on your floor plan, your tiles, your floor color, even like everything. So when you see the photo...
How do you get that data into your system?
So we ask you to upload a floor plan, for example, in the beginning.
But floor plan doesn't have the color of
and
the floor and
photographs of your apartment. So in the onboarding, you give us your floor plan and you just randomly click 5-6 photos. That also helps us know, for example, where the electrical sockets are and so on, so that the lighting and so on would happen exactly where it's supposed to.
But this is not automated.
That's what it is now.
Oh, so you click pictures?
We invented this technology. I mean, I didn't do anything here because I'm not smart enough to do it. But we hired a contractor. He's a really smart person who sold his previous company to Autodesk for a lot of money. And he's like top few on earth in 3D tech. And so he built this technology for us where what I do is from our admin panel, I just say, this is an apartment. We have style sets. So we have like Scandinavian apartment, modern apartment, industrial. You can choose from the onboarding what style you like. And that's it. You get the floor plan and all of that. And we kind of translate that into a really big JSON instruction file saying that
The floor plan.
the floor plan and all the things that should be in the floor plan. So for example, this sofa, this chair, blah, blah, blah.
So the elements that you will add later on.
And that instruction file is automatically converted to a beautiful render. And that happens end to end completely automatically.
Like, how long does it take? So if I upload it right now.
Yeah, so right now we have an intermediary manual step where when you upload your floor plan, our interior designers see the floor plan and manually drag and drop the furniture on the floor plan. And that step basically creates that JSON file. And then that till renders is about 10 minutes. And we get really like, I can even show you some of them. They're like,
sure, we can you send it to me, so I'll put it in the video when I render it.
Smart. And so like, and actually we did this apartment now where if you look at the renders we sent to the customer and the apartment real photos that my co-founder took from his phone, you cannot distinguish it. It's that, like, we're reaching that level, and that kind of becomes our core IP because we're not selling individual furniture items. We're saying this is what your apartment can look like. And now you can just pay $200-$300 per month and get it.
Or you can also buy it upfront.
No.
You cannot buy it upfront.
However, all of your monthly payments go towards owning the furniture. So after your contract ends in 3 years, let's say you've already paid us $15,000, but your furniture costed $20,000, you can continue subscription unlimited indefinitely. That's your choice. Or you can pay us that $5,000 difference and actually own all the furniture also. So all of your monthly payments actually go towards ownership.
Yeah, but that makes sense because the furniture value is deteriorating over time. But you have the money upfront, so you have the time value of money, which could be your profit.
Yeah. And also we have exclusive deals with retailers. So for example, our partner right now is XXX Loads Group, which is the world's second largest retailer after IKEA. And they have a lot of different companies under them. So we're working with the Swiss company called Pfister, which is also therefore the second largest Swiss retailer, also after IKEA. And so we also
What's up with Swiss people and furniture? Like IKEA is Swiss.
No, IKEA is Swedish.
Oh, okay, Nordic people.
Yeah, everyone.
Schengen people and furniture.
Oh well.
Or even their style is very peculiar and considered to be one of the best, if not the best.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Like
Northwestern Europe, for aesthetics, like even if you look at like Swiss typography or where the best designers come from and so on, it's
generally Norway or Sweden or Denmark.
Northwestern Europe,
the
for
company that I work from has one of the best designers, and he's in Denmark. But it's not, his design sense goes beyond UX and UI. So I saw his home and that was so well done.
For sure.
His background is so cool on the calls.
Yeah.
Okay. So coming back to the topic of this podcast, which is TypeScript.
TypeScript.
I think it's less enthusiastic, like not as exciting as making good furnitures and these 3D renders.
Although, in our defense, we use TypeScript to give you a really good furniture life.
So, what is your role at the company?
So, I'm the co-founder and CTO, meaning that if you're a 3-person company like we are, you have to do everything regardless, right? So, so in technical stuff, I do end-to-end from architecture, DevOps stuff, although I hire a lot of smarter people than me to set it up for me so that I can take it forward. But also like front-end stuff. My co-founder, I do the UX together, end-to-end app stuff, rendering service. So we have a lot of cool tech also, but we have a lot of... So it's a bit kind of like Airbnb. Is that a tech company or not? Right? You can argue either way, but what is their tech? It's a really nice website, really nice app. That's kind of their tech.
I think the model is of a tech company.
Sure. But then we're sitting at a WeWork, and WeWork would never say they're not a tech company.
Yeah, but they're not.
Obviously.
Yeah, they're not.
But so my point is for
Airbnb is...
Yeah, for sure.
WeWork is a real estate company.
But so the bigger point I'm making is that Airbnb's core tech is essentially their customer support stuff, sure, internal tooling. But for consumers, it's the nice website, nice app, focus on UX, good experience. So for us, that's also kind of reflected here, right? Our core tech is also a great experience while renting an apartment. But we also have the whole tech, like high-tech, crazy stuff, like the automated rendering systems and so on. And so we definitely see ourselves as a tech company because of that second part. Like, if you have to kind of say, like, let's say Alphabet is at the top.
Like pure
tech. WeWork is at the bottom.
Yeah.
Pure untech.
They just want to be tech, but
Uber is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And Airbnb
is also at Uber's level.
Airbnb is maybe slightly lower to me because Airbnb, like Uber, has some cool tech when it comes to like location and so on. Airbnb is a bit lower, but we see ourselves definitely much higher than Uber also, just because of that other part. If we didn't have that, we would be exactly Airbnb, right? We do physical stuff, but we have good tech in terms of UX and so on.
You have a good e-commerce website.
Yeah, essentially.
But you have more than that since.
But now, yeah, exactly. With our render system and all of that automation and so on, we are like definitely closer to the Alphabets than the. Because like if you think about it, if nothing works, we completely fail as a business. Rental furniture is not a thing anyone wants. We can essentially do what Ralph did, which is sell the company for the IP to Autodesk, right? Because a lot of our IP is about 3D technology and renders and so on.
Or you can take your
IP and give it to IKEA.
Or any other retailer who
exactly
wants furniture, and you have the system to process floor plans, they have their inventory.
Absolutely,
I'm sure
exactly.
they must have some
or
3D models.
automated renderings of all their models in apartments of people, AR stuff that we're exploring now. Like, we do a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
So the bigger point is, I think we're much closer to the Alphabets of the world than the Airbnbs in that tech. And so therefore my role is more technical than it would be otherwise if I were CTO of Airbnb, for example, where core tech is lower tech, essentially. So TypeScript, we are full stack TypeScript. Our backends are all TypeScript running Node. Our front ends are all TypeScript running Svelte.
Oh.
So we can talk about Svelte later, but I guess we would digress too much. We're going to talk about TypeScript first.
Okay. So how long have you been building this? Can you give us a sense of the volume of code, like the depth of code? How many people have worked on it?
So it's interesting. I started working full-time on Koi in July. So by that logic, it's been 8 months, right? But I had this idea maybe 3 years ago now that I love building these side projects, right? Or just like what you would eventually call a startup even. Like Oswald Labs, my previous company, we did a bunch of R&D. Like today, like no exaggeration, literally there are thousands of kids with dyslexia who are actually reading using our tech, and their lives are easier. Like we published a research paper in the IEEE that shows that kids with dyslexia read 21% faster using our tech versus just reading books. So that's like legit tech, but we transitioned to a B2B SaaS model and so on. And so like a lot of the products that I built eventually can be sold as SaaS products. Makes sense. All of these really, essentially. And so I thought, like, every time I have this new idea and I want to work on a new thing, I end up spending a lot of time on my tech first before I focus on the product part, right?
Yeah, the initial pain, setting up the database.
It's so annoying. And it could even take weeks if you have a SaaS thing, right? Because you want to integrate with payment gateways, monthly subscription, API key support. Like, it's crazy. And so 3 years ago, I started working on a project called Start with 2 A's. And it had like 2 things: Start UI, which is the front end, it was a Vue app, and Start API, which is the Node TypeScript backend. And that's 3 years in the making.
So you chose TypeScript 3 years ago?
Approximate. Okay. I think I don't even remember. Maybe you'll have to fact check me on this. Could be 2018. Could be could be 2018. Or maybe even Start API version 1 was pure JavaScript. Version 2 was TypeScript. Right now I think it's like 3 or 4. So like 3 years in the making. So I used Start API in production on Oswald Labs. Start API has all sorts of authentication, including OAuth with third-party providers and so on. It has all sorts of roles. So, teams can have users can have like permissions. It has like all the things you would want, like 2-factor authentication or even SAML and so on. And then it has...
Do you build SAML?
No.
You can take
integrate, right?
Passport.
Or whatever, It has it has monthly subscription billing, all of that, like invoices and like so it has all of the boilerplate you need. So with Start API at Oswald Labs, I add one additional module and I say these are all the customers and like this is how the API will work. But 90% of the code about login, users, management, billing, all of that was already in Start. So I used it in production with Oswald Labs, which had at peak about 5,000 daily active users.
Okay.
So that's not crazy, but it works.
And not bad for a startup.
Yeah, for sure. And then after that, I did a little bit of work with SpeakUp, which is a Dutch telecom, whatever, VoIP kind of company. And I worked with them on, so they are like a core tech company, 15-year-old company. So like not a startup, but not huge. And they mostly did like human-to-human sales and so on. But so they wanted to transform that tech to, let's say, Twilio, where you have APIs for making calls and answering calls and sending messages and so on. And so in one summer, 2 years ago, 2 months basically, I took Start API, I integrated with all of their Keycloak, auth management and so on, and their API, whatever that they had internally, and I built a production developer platform for them. Again, 2 months is more than enough because I had basically Start API was like 1.5 year old already.
Yeah.
Then I worked on another project with them. So like over 3 years, when we go back to last July when I founded Koi and worked full time on it, Start API is now already 3 years old. It's gone through 3 different major versions with breaking changes, like a brand new Start API essentially, which I had just kind of worked in parallel with Koi. And so then it becomes significantly easier. So of course my choice of stack means that I kind of got 6 months for free from Start API.
Because you have built the components.
Over 3 years myself.
And you know, so there's a style, every developer, every team has a style.
Sure.
And you have encoded your style in Start API. So you know how you would handle your roles or your payments, and you put all that in and you just keep reusing it.
Exactly.
So it's 4 years old now.
Now
4 versions old.
4 versions old, which is like, that's 2 years old or whatever, approximately. And the most recent version now is based on something called Nest.js, which is a
Do you
TypeScript.
keep changing the routers?
So it's not a router. So until now, it was kind of best practices combined in a repo. But in the most recent version, I started using a framework built on top of TypeScript and Node called Nest, which has a lot of the abstractions Angular gives you. So like providers, injection and stuff like that. So that kind of makes the code significantly more scalable and manageable.
Okay, now let's come to this point. Scalable and manageable.
So I'm talking about compared to previous Start versions.
Alright.
Not
JavaScript.
Not JavaScript.
In general,
Yeah. So imagine like you have an Express library and you build like a site on Express with auth and API and passport and everything. So now with Nest, I don't have to even do the routing and all of that. It has really good like support of modules which can include controllers and its own services, and the modules are sandboxed, but then you can say add these 3 modules to the controller and then it would work, like stuff like that. So anyway, the point is Start most recent uses Nest. Nest is the best in its space. So that means if you want to build a Node backend for an API, you shouldn't even think about anything else.
The point is that we should think about it, because with NPM, I'm not talking about TypeScript, just in the NPM ecosystem.
Sure.
It's very easy to bring in complexity to your project. So with Nest.js, you don't know the underlying layers. You don't know where the server is. You don't know how it is being managed or controlled, or how would you start it. And when your project grows older, so if your project is 5 years old and 15 people or maybe 15 different teams have touched your project, and everybody brings in their own idea of complexity. So if you're writing JavaScript, imagine every team that touch your project install a new router. Somebody writes Express, somebody writes Nest, or something else. There's something called Micro by Vercel. So everybody installs that, and in the end what you have is just spaghetti. Because then nobody would know what the components are, and since you installed major chunks of code through NPM, they act as a black box.
Sure,
so you do not know what would you do if they break down, because you don't have any idea.
I agree completely. So like, for example, with Start API, we have this repo called start/packages, which has like 20 different npm packages, which take away some of the abstractions. Like one is called start email, and that would just do all of the email stuff for you. So that when you include it, you can say send an email to this user with this template, like forgot your password template, and then it does that. So using Nest kind of gives me this stepping stone on which I can kind of build on top of, and then that kind of becomes Start API. And so at Koi, I had like 3 years of work, which kind of gave me that head start. So that's why my choice of stack was obvious, right? You also have to remember...
Because you have been working on it.
Sure, but you also have to remember if you're a solo founder, solo technical founder at least, you have to build this for the foreseeable short-term future.
I think for every team, even if you're not a solo tech founder, if you're starting up and you're not at an enterprise company, there's only 1 or 2 people who will build the stack for at least 100 customers.
Sure.
After that, you might have enough bandwidth to get more people, but
So-
it's generally 1 or 2 people.
So if you look at like the defense of, let's say, MongoDB, right? Nobody wants to use it in production, right?
But why? Like, the question is why. There should be reasons for why. Like, why did you start using TypeScript?
Yeah, I'm getting to it. But the point I'm making is Mongo, cool database, works with JSON, works well.
I don't understand the concept of cool. Why is it cool?
No, because for prototyping, it's way easier than setting up a scalable server.
Right, that makes sense. That's a pro.
So basically, the whole NPM ecosystem is built on the idea that you want something done quick as a prototype that works. And so then if you want to use JavaScript with Mongo, it's perfect. It works for 10,000 users with no problem, right? But obviously, when we build a company and we want to have a lot of scale and we have to build with best practice in mind, if I had to choose now, like because I don't I don't write Clojure and so on, if I had to choose as a CTO, I would maybe think about Go as my primary language.
Exactly.
That would be ideal for me.
Go or Rust.
Or Rust.
But the question is why? Like, for me, I look deep into a stack and I try to analyze what I'm doing, what my goals are, and how would that stack let me achieve those goals in the best possible way. So if I look into TypeScript or any type language, let's just put TypeScript aside, let's just talk about types. So when you're writing your program, it's basically taking data from somewhere, transforming it and sending it somewhere else. With types, it is very easy to know what the shape of the input and the output is. So that's a great pro. If I move out of the company or if somebody else joins the company, they would know all the time what the shape of the input and the output is. And it also gives you a sense of correctness. Like Go is a very good example, because before it is compiled, you will know if any function throughout your program is not receiving the data that it expected. Which makes a lot of sense. That gives you confidence that your program is correct.
Right.
And this sense of correctness is even more so in languages like Elm or Haskell, which say that they do not, like the tagline of Elm is to have 0 production-based bugs. But that's misleading.
Obviously.
Yeah, that's so misleading.
Obviously.
Because
Sure.
okay, you fix the types, but is types the
Obviously
biggest
not.
concern of
People
your
are
system?
stupid, right?
Yeah.
So just having good types does not fix bugs, obviously. So, but the question you're missing is, it's not TypeScript versus Go. It's JavaScript versus TypeScript.
But okay, then it's even worse, because TypeScript is just JavaScript at the end. Then you take a language which has flaws of its own. It is not well designed. It does not have a clear sense of what objects and data types are. It does not have true concurrency. It's generally slow. And you take that imperfect thing and you paint it with types.
I mean, so here's, so why I'm saying JavaScript versus TypeScript is, yes, you are right. But if you're a JavaScript developer, your choice is a node backend with JavaScript or a node backend with TypeScript. These are your only production choices. In that case, TypeScript becomes the obvious choice.
I think these are the mainstream choices that are being, so TypeScript specifically is being marketed by Microsoft. It is similar to what Java was 15 years ago, being marketed by Oracle, and it boomed in popularity. Similarly, TypeScript boomed in popularity. Go is also being marketed by Google, and Swift is being marketed by Apple, but Microsoft is doing a great job here. But that doesn't mean that the language itself is good enough. It doesn't mean that it's JavaScript versus TypeScript.
No, but if you compare TypeScript to Go, if I have to start a company, I have engineers, I would obviously never choose TypeScript. But if I'm a solo founder who's been writing JavaScript for more than a decade, I would rather use TypeScript than not TypeScript and still JavaScript.
My question is why? Like, why wouldn't you look into other... If you were into types and you were writing TypeScript...
But I'm not into types. I'm into JavaScript.
Okay, if you're into JavaScript, that means you're writing for the browser.
Sure.
You can look into Haskell. Like, Haskell is like a truly pure, well-done functional language that can compile to JavaScript. Then it could be JavaScript versus Haskell or JavaScript versus PureScript. You can look into Elm.
Yeah.
That's
PureScript
perfect.
is also a really good option these days.
F#, you can compile F# down. It's not as straightforward as Elm. Closure. I would not go as far as Closure.
Yeah, not for the browser at least.
For me personally, I would. But if the question is JavaScript versus TypeScript, then the reasoning for that bias
I think you also
is
have
because
to remember,
of the marketing.
No, I don't think that's the case. I think the marketing is actually a very small part of it. If anything, there are still remnants of the Microsoft's evil days, which is kind of preventing TypeScript to go where it can.
I think with Nadella it has changed.
Yeah,
like
now,
with VS Code.
last 5 years, VS Code, GitHub, NPM, like Microsoft is the good open source company. But that was not...
At least they pretend to be.
No, I think they are.
Yeah, they have a good image.
What is the option? Who else is there?
I do not trust their companies because I know how they work.
Sure, okay. But anyway, we're not going to get into corporate.
Just the choice. So if you're writing JavaScript, TypeScript is not the only
developer
choice.
Can incrementally adopt TypeScript without essentially learning anything new, right? You like TypeScript is so easy that just writing JavaScript for a year as a front-end developer means that you can now use TypeScript even without looking at tutorials. It's that straightforward. Versus even PureScript or Haskell.
Haskell and PureScript are the same thing.
Okay. Yeah. Where you would essentially learn a brand new syntax, brand new way of even doing things.
Thinking.
Like an entire new mindset.
Yes.
And so I think that's the good part of TypeScript.
Exactly. So the problem here that I'm trying to point out is that we have a language called JavaScript, which is just good enough. It's not good. It's just good enough. And people start writing JavaScript and they look for the next incremental change.
Yeah.
Where TypeScript fits in really well.
Absolutely.
Like, it just owns that space. That's why maybe that's a good point for TypeScript. But that doesn't mean that TypeScript is a good language.
For sure.
Because it is building on top of the flaws that JavaScript has.
I agree with that though.
And the problem is that it is being marketed as a good language. It is being marketed as a cool language. So people would think that that is the right way to go. Whereas you would the right way to go would be to figure out what your problems are, which the problem generally is that your code base would guide what you can do. That is as your project grows in complexity, what you have will decide what you can build further. That would be the biggest factor. And when you have a code base that is written in JavaScript, and when I say JavaScript, I'm just pointing out at two things. There is mutable state and there are a lot of side effects. So if any system that has a ton of mutable state and a ton of side effects needs to grow, the complexity would be exponential.
I mean, I agree with all of what you said.
That is what you need to remove. And you can remove that by going towards F# or Haskell or Closure, where you have good ways to manage mutability and good ways to manage side effects.
Yes. Now, if you look at the history, right, how did we get here? JavaScript was not designed to run on a server.
Or anywhere.
Ever. It was designed to be a tiny thing to be in a browser sandbox with very limited access to do some DOM manipulation, right? That's how we got here. It was like Netscape days. Now, I think a lot of people who are essentially becoming programmers for the first time from HTML, CSS, adopt JavaScript.
Like you and me.
Like me, right?
Me
Adopt JavaScript. And then the next obvious choice is to adopt TypeScript.
But why? Like, what is we are not realizing the problems and we are just going for the next cool thing. So
I don't think it's the cool thing. I think it's the next useful addition for JavaScript. So here's my thing, right? If you have a 4-year computer science degree, you understand data structures and algorithms, you're not gonna anyway write code for the browser most likely, I don't know if maybe that's a generalization.
Yeah,
but
that's
your
a very
stack
broad
might not be
generalization.
TypeScript for sure. But if you're a person who comes from a web background, who's a designer who codes, or like a JavaScript person essentially, TypeScript is just like enough in your comfort zone and enough increases your productivity
Exactly, like
that it's okay. It
that-
works really well.
That is the problem. That TypeScript is just okay.
Yes, but that is enough for all of those people, right? If you
But
don't have
it is
time to
not
learn a
good
brand new
enough.
language, TypeScript is basically saying, you can write JavaScript like you were all of these years. I would just make it a bit easier and a bit better and a bit safer for you.
I think I would question the easy aspect of it, but yeah, I generally agree. If you are a JavaScript developer who would do first principle analysis on your problems, TypeScript would not be the answer. If you're looking
Sure.
for incremental changes, you would not go towards TypeScript. You would try
What would
to
be your
reduce
alternate super incremental change?
up. It
Better
will not-
patterns in JavaScript, RxJS reactivity, stuff like that maybe?
Yes. So you have to look at the root causes. I personally believe that people use TypeScript because it's the next new thing.
Yeah, but I don't think that. Because...
Okay, the question is, do you think that in 10 years the code bases written in TypeScript will survive?
So there are a few things here, right? There can be best practices to ensure they do. The NPM ecosystem...
The given best practices, with the given best practices.
No, but it's still more complicated because the NPM ecosystem makes things complicated, right? Dependencies get updated.
Exactly. The complexity
But
aspect of it.
but my best practice, I mean, if you, let's say, cache all your dependencies to this version and then have that bundled,
But
that would work forever.
Ah.
Infinitely. If you don't ever...
But there are always security
Yeah,
concerns.
there is always like a new security bug that you have to now patch and update
yes.
a dependency. So yes, you
So
require a
that's
lot more
that's the
maintenance.
JavaScript problem. Because
Yes.
you install complexity.
Yes.
It's easy to install complexity.
Yes.
And then there is the upper level, the TypeScript level problem, which is that TypeScript is just good enough. And it's easy, it's accessible. That doesn't mean it is simple. Simple in the sense that is the right thing to do in order to make your code base survive.
Yeah, but so that's how I'm getting back to what I talked about in the beginning, which is JavaScript to me is a language for making prototypes and not for a system you want to run a decade from now.
Oh, yeah, right.
TypeScript makes it much easier to build said prototypes.
But
and
not
much
something
safer.
that would run for 10 years.
And that's not the intention though.
Okay.
Like for me, my intention now using core TypeScript is this should work as long as I am coding. Right? The day I have a team of 10 engineers, I would obviously say, and for me, Go is a choice just because I personally really like the language. It might not even be the best choice. But
I think the Go language has the same problems. If you think like I am thinking, it doesn't still solve the root problems. It just says that if you have types, so think of types as guardrails. You have lines, the railway tracks, and your train cannot go beyond the track. And whenever you need to switch track, you need to create some interface in between, which means it is slow comparatively. Imagine you have a layered function that has 15 functions in the chain, 15 processes in the chain. And if you change the type at step number 4, you'd have to change the types across the remaining steps. So 5, 6, 7, up to 15. The rationale behind that is that having types in your system will make it easier for the compiler to test it and also make it easier for the people who are writing your code to know what the shape of the data is. But that doesn't help in any way in the long run.
sure.
Because
So wait, are you arguing now for weak types or are you arguing TypeScript?
I'm just TypeScript is out. Like
Okay.
I'm
So
just
you're
talking
saying
about types.
should we have types or should we write I don't know, Python?
Python, Clojure.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. So
Ruby.
that's what you're arguing. Okay. I
think
don't have a horse
I'm
in this
not,
fight.
I'm not arguing against types. I'm just arguing against the rationale of types.
I think you can always get the best of both worlds, right? Why don't you write a typed code base using...
Yeah, this would show up in the...
Would it?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
But it's okay. Like
So, anyway, previous sentence restarted.
Yes.
Yeah, so why wouldn't you want an ideal world where you have a typed language which has best functional practices or something?
that's Haskell, but that is too pure.
Okay.
So somebody said that Haskell is the purest implementation of Haskell.
Sure.
Gee, does it make sense?
Kind of.
Since Haskell is written in Haskell, it's a recursive definition. So
I mean, it's complicated because TypeScript is also written as TypeScript.
True.
But anyway.
But you cannot compare TypeScript to Haskell.
I'm not trying to.
It's not pure in that sense. So
Yeah, of course.
Haskell is the purest implementation of Haskell. Like, Haskell is the art. Haskell is the best form of what Haskell could be. But we are not in the business of exploring art. We are not in the business of listening to music.
So you're saying the pragmatic thing to do is take Haskell, but remove the extra complications of types and so on.
No. I will not suggest anybody to do anything. I would just suggest everybody to look at the root causes of their problems.
Yeah.
So the root cause, if the root cause of your problem is being solved by types, which can be the case for most systems where you're doing integrations. So if you have a third-party system, types are phenomenal in that sense. But I don't think that types are answer to everything.
I agree. Yeah. So now I'll tell you, my root cause...
The problem here is that when you choose a typed language, you assume that types are the answer to everything.
Okay.
So your system is built around that thinking. So you place so much importance on types that you stop considering that you can make simple systems.
Let me give you a really controversial example which you might appreciate. PHP, right? Okay. Started like JavaScript, built as essentially a templating engine.
On the
now
backend.
A full-fledged language.
Yes.
Same problems that JavaScript has, almost. However, no strong types, at least unless you have all of these extensions and so on. So PHP with no types, but with really good best practices, let's say Laravel practices, can be a really good language.
I think, that's a good argument. I think that would be Go to a large extent.
Sure, yeah.
Good practices, a good support ecosystem. But at the end of the day, the practices that you're introducing are at the programmer level, at the human level.
Yeah, it's not on a language level.
It's not mathematically sound.
I agree.
So creating packages and putting them in different places is something that is a convention that I can break easily. So you have to figure out what the core problem is.
Yeah.
So
let me tell you, like, awesome thing. For me, what is my core problem? I have 10 days. I have to ship an API. I need some developer docs. I need to show a demo to my investors. I think I can quickly write JavaScript, but TypeScript takes the same time. I use TypeScript. I know I can automatically generate a really good documentation
install
with
everything.
JS doc, but also I can, it's faster, of course, but also with JS doc and with type interference, I can really well get documentation and so on from the code. Even API endpoint documentation in Open API spec automatically because it can tell you the interface and so on. So, perfect solution.
Yeah, it's very quick and it's easy, and there's no denying to the fact that JavaScript systems are easy.
It's a prototyping language, and TypeScript is the best way to quickly do something
with JavaScript. But that's not the most efficient way in the long term.
Yes.
So,
but my problem is not a long-term problem. Like, I have enough money to delete all my code and hire engineers and do it in the future. That's what I'm banking on, right? That my prototype, all the investor will say, oh, this is a great idea. Here's $5 million. Now I can hire a great team who will write Haskell.
But they would write... Oh, okay.
They would delete the code base.
The problem here is that they'll probably write TypeScript too. Because nobody writes Haskell or nobody writes Clojure.
Sure.
Or most people would write TypeScript because if it's so easy to get started,
low,
yes,
that everyone is specialized in TypeScript now.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the problem.
And the point is that you would think that you're doing the right thing. Since you're writing types, you're writing TypeScript or Go, and your system
No, but TypeScript is the name type is in TypeScript, but TypeScript is not JavaScript with types.
Yes, it's a more efficient version of TypeScript.
But also, like, if you look at new features in TypeScript, like the TypeScript development team and TC39, like, TypeScript has some really good ideas which are implemented before the ECMAScript specification. There are ideas from TypeScript that eventually end up in JavaScript. Let's say the question mark dot operator, right? Or null crossing and so on. So TypeScript is what JavaScript can be. It's not JavaScript with types.
That raises a bigger concern. So you're building systems which are incrementally not coherent. That means they are breaking changes.
I mean, it's a bit complicated because, of course, the TypeScript team has to, like, it very rarely happens that a breaking change from language syntax happens in TypeScript, and that happens when a proposal has reached stage 4.
But even if it doesn't happen in
implementing soon.
TypeScript, it generally happens with ECMAScript.
Yeah, sure.
Like all the time.
But so ECMAScript is it's a living document.
That every language is a living document in that sense.
But it's an evolving language, right? We don't even know what it is right now.
Isn't that the biggest problem? Because we already know.
But we're getting there.
Okay, so let's go back and see. I did not have any perspective on languages until 3 years ago or 4 years ago, and I was somebody who would write whatever the code base was written in. That was mostly JavaScript or Python, sometimes Ruby or Java, depending on where I am. And then I found this dude with curly hair, and he was talking at a Ruby conference about why Ruby sucks. And he comes in and he says that there are two things that we generally confuse with each other. He says that there is something called simple and there is something called easy. But we use the terms interchangeably. That's not the case. Easy is the opposite of something that is hard to get in terms of distance. So for me, it's really easy to pick this mic up, but it's a little harder to go over there and pick that bottle up.
Sure.
And it's even more hard to maybe move to Chicago and buy a new Blue Yeti mic and bring it back here. Easy in terms of distance. And simple is something that has less layers or complexity.
Sure.
The opposite of simple would be complex. So the word simple comes from Greek roots. That's called simplex, which means that simplex basically means ropes which are not tied together. So if we take a ton of ropes and tie it to maybe a stick, and then you intermingle that.
Yeah.
You braid the
Sure.
ropes. That's complex. And the opposite of that is simplex, where the ropes are just hanging freely.
Yeah.
But we use these ideas interchangeably. For a system to be simple, we would know exactly the components, exactly what the components are. So if you're building a web server, you would know there's a server, there's a router, there's a database layer, and somewhere there's a UI. And data needs to flow across these systems. But with easy, you do not know what the systems are. You just know that you can get them at NPM.
Yeah.
That is the root cause of the problem.
Yeah, but I think we're agreeing. We have the same logic. What I'm saying is, the goals are different. Like for me, using TypeScript and JavaScript, my goal is different from...
But would that mean that you would never build a system that's meant to last?
No. When I need to, I will.
Yeah, but that would be the language of your choice.
I don't know if that's the case,
You could build a system
though.
quickly with a good language like Haskell or Clojure, and you can also make it last longer. So you get both the elements, both the properties that are desirable. But it's not true for the other languages. It's true in the sense that you can build a system and you can push it to its limit, and once you're done, you can rewrite it. It's so common for JavaScript code bases to be rewritten. That's not common for Haskell, that's not common for Clojure. So once you write Clojure, and it's not slow. You'll have to spend some time upfront to make it easy for yourself. But once you have reached a stage where you made Clojure easy, then it's simple already. It was simple by design. And you made it easy, you made it accessible. And then you can get both the properties. You can make it quick and you can make it last.
So let's talk about some new ideas, right? So
Let's talk about old ideas first. So
Okay.
I reached Clojure because I am a big fan of Paul Graham, Y Combinator.
Yeah, I know
Y
Paul.
Combinator is written
in one of the dialects, right?
He wrote a dialect of Lisp called Arc,
Uh-huh.
and he wrote Y Combinator's news website
Yeah, Hacker
in
News
Arc.
in Arc.
Now imagine the kind of complexity that would entail. So you're writing a language for just one project.
What? By the way, just a quick side note. What are your thoughts on the whole Lisp dialects and so on, and the whole Lisp ecosystem? Because if you talk to @PG, it's like if you read his essays and so on, it's like, or his people who think like him versus people who don't. Where are you on that?
There's
spectrum?
a bridge, and I think I've crossed that bridge completely. I would never go back on the C style side.
Okay.
There's a reason for that. Our brain is meant to think. Our brain thinks in terms of associations. Like our brain is technically a graph, and our memories are hops on the nodes on that graph. So is our thinking process. When I'm trying to solve a problem, I'm trying to create an association in my neural network. That's all. So I need something that would help me express those associations in the simplest possible way. Simplest in the sense, it should be coherent in the way I'm thinking. Like, it should not introduce its syntax, it should not introduce complexities of its own, right? So if there is a tool for thought, that would be Lisp. You're not building. If you want to build a system, you'd rather write Go or C++ or JavaScript for that matter, if you want to build it quickly. But if you want to build a system while you're thinking, am I making sense, or is it?
Yeah, I think so.
So when you're thinking, you have some steps in your head, and Lisp is the best way to express those steps, because it does not hinder your thinking. There is no syntax. With everything else, there is syntax. With Lisp, there is no syntax. And Clojure takes it to a more extreme level, where everything is immutable and everything is lazy. So you get some good properties of a good computer system. You cannot change your data types. So once your system has started, you cannot do anything about it. It will never change, which limits what you could do compared to a mutable runtime. But it also gives you some guarantees that your program would be correct, and in the long run. So I'm completely on the Clojure hand side of things. It has to be a Lisp, and also immutable, also side effect free. I will not go as far as Haskell, because then it starts limiting what I can do. Then I have to write Haskell and I have to think like Haskell. That is the art. But Clojure is more like a brush that will help me make art. And mutable languages are like the extra cloth that you use to wipe the edge of the canvas. That's where I would put languages. But you should definitely shift, because it gives you a different way of thinking. For everyone else who is watching, it's possible that you were never introduced to a Clojure or a Lisp.
I have been, by the way, because of you.
Yeah, but
many
it's
times.
only because I'm so vocal about it,
Sure.
and I keep pushing everyone. But imagine how I was introduced to Lisp. Nobody pushed me. I had a mentor who told me that you should learn Clojure at some point of your time in your life. And I said, okay, I have some time, why not learn Clojure? And everything in the world would force you to not learn Clojure or Haskell. There are no jobs. It's very hard to get started. The documentation is not at par with Go or TypeScript or JavaScript or Ruby for that matter. You'll have to read the code to understand the code. I had to go inside Clojure's Java implementation to see how maps work. That's stupid. That's something that you should not be doing. And that's a fault of the Clojure ecosystem. But if you are able to push through that inertia, and if you are able to fight for a while, and there's a component of luck involved as well. So I got a project with a UK based company, and I started writing Clojure for a huge system. The first Clojure project that I worked on had about 40 users, not much. The second had 3 million, but not many active, so less than 1% active. The third project had 10 million users, 30% active. So we are talking about 500,000 to 600, maybe even 1 million requests every day. Upwards of 100,000 requests every hour. So that becomes a DevOps problem as well. That becomes a database problem as well. That becomes a political problem as well, because you're talking across time zones, you're talking across 5 different teams. There's a different design teams, there's a different executive team. And you have to run that project. You have to run that for 5 years, otherwise you would not be able to recoup the investment. And at that point of time, you need something that helps you think properly and forces you to do the right thing. If you introduce mutability in your program that TypeScript and Go allow for, at some point of time it will start biting you. If your program has side effects, which by the way Go is really good at handling, just TypeScript is not as good. But if you have side effects, at some point of time the system will bite you. In that sense, I think Go is amazing. In that sense, I think Haskell is the best. Clojure would be somewhere between Go and Haskell. But again, so I had that need, and I was lucky to be in a position where I could think. Somebody was paying me to think, and my team used Clojure. Again, that's the point. So if you're building for longevity and you want to build systems and you like expressing yourself in a truer form, then a functional Lisp would be ideal.
Yeah.
But if your need is to get the prototype out and you do not want to spend time learning,
if you don't have time learning.
If you don't have time to learn. But just imagine if you're going to be in the tech business, you're going to be here at least until you turn 40. I'm hoping that you might exit before that. Maybe you have some $1 million exits and you don't have to work anymore, probably. But I would be working. Like, I like doing what I do. Would you be working?
I would be doing something always.
You'd always be doing something, right? Even if you have shit ton of money in your bank, you won't care about money anymore, but you would still be interested in expressing yourself. For that, I think there is nothing better than Clojure at this point of time. You know, Clojure has 10 versions. Like, it has reached 1.10.
Okay.
It started in 2007 or something. I don't know the exact dates. There hasn't been a single breaking change in any version. So you can take Clojure code today and run it on version 0.1.
And I have to take my code through Babel transformations to make sure it works.
Yeah. You see, there are simply... that language was well thought of. Somebody spent time thinking about what systems are, how they should be built, what is the best tool to equip the developer with, and how to make your programs last. How to make them simple, not easy. We are not talking about easy. So Rich Hickey is the creator of Clojure, the person that I was talking about. And he is a musician as well. Like a very good, accomplished musician. Okay. And he says that, have you ever tried playing a guitar?
Mm-hmm.
You haven't? Have you ever tried playing any musical instrument?
I mean, define trying. Because then I've tried everything.
No,
but I
like
haven't played anything, no.
You prepared for a performance?
No, I don't.
Do you know somebody who did?
Yeah.
Okay, so how long do you think does it take to learn a simple song maybe?
It depends. I would think either no time or a lot of time.
On a guitar?
Yeah. So if you want to do it properly, I would think it would take a lot of time.
Yeah, I would say properly, like performance level properly. So there's an audience and I need to play for them.
Mm-hmm.
All musical instruments are built for experts.
Mm-hmm.
They are simple. Like, the concept is really simple. The concept of piano is really simple. There are 13 steps, there are 8 chords, you make a beat, and that's it. The concept is really simple, but it's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have to spend a lot of time practicing, like making your fingers swell, and then you will be able to play a simple tone. But the guitar is not meant for beginners. Guitar is meant for experts. Yet people learn and they spend a lot of time and they get good at it and then they can play easily.
Mm-hmm.
That is the painful aspect. But that won't last forever. A guitarist only takes... If I'm 26 and if I started playing guitar today, it might take me 1 year to get used to it, to get over the pain. But the remaining time of my career would be spent working and building my skill ups. Like, that would not include that pain. But yet, the programming languages and systems are built for beginners. And even when they grow up, even when they pass that pain point, they still continue to use something that was built for beginners.
Yeah.
That hit me at a different level, because I knew that I was not a beginner. I knew that I did not want to build systems that will go out of production in 1 year. Like, I don't like that at all. So I wanted something that would stay in production. That's my benchmark. If nobody is using my work, it's not worth it. The last 3 systems that I've built collectively have over 15 million users still in production. The oldest system was touched by me about 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's working, and I'm sure that it will continue to work. That is the kind of surety that I want with the work I do. And that translates to my personal projects as well. So I do not pick up projects at all. Like I would take only one side project in a year or maybe 2 years. But I would just stick to it. And I would keep building it in a way that it runs without me. I don't think I can achieve that with Go or TypeScript or Rust or C++ or Java.
Yeah, that's true. Like
But
I think
I can achieve that with Clojure.
yeah, perhaps.
Not perhaps, like I
Yeah,
can.
I don't know enough to make that, so I believe you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
That is the difference, I would say. That's how we cross the bridge.
But so it just happens to be that my goals are not aligned with that right now.
I think your goals are aligned with that, you're just not seeing it. Because if you're going to be somebody who makes software or some kind of technology for a long period of time, you better get good equipment to work with. Like imagine you are in a carpenter's shop and the only tools you have is a handsaw and a hammer and nails. You do not have an angle grinder, you do not have a power saw, you do not have a drill, you do not have a vacuum cleaner, you do not have a spray paint. That's what you're missing if you're not writing a language like Haskell or Clojure. You're still building the same tools. We are still building furniture. At the end, I don't think any user would care in which language the software was written in. It's immaterial. It doesn't matter. What matters is your expression and the cost of it. If I'm able to build the same system, and we have to include the creation cost and also the cost of maintenance, because cost of maintenance is more invisible than the cost of creation, because that comes upfront.
Yeah.
If you combine all that, a system like Clojure or a system built in Clojure or Haskell will be way cheaper.
Yeah, over the long term, right?
And I think
But
your
upfront-
goals too are aligned. You're just not seeing them in that light.
Okay.
Because if you are going to build anything for a long period of time, then you would want to build it in a fast and easy way.
Yeah.
Right? You have fast and simple way. Like easy and simple. You have easy, but you do not have simple yet.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So if you start learning Clojure today, it might take you maybe 6 months just to get around the syntax because it's ugly. It doesn't make sense. The brackets are in the wrong place. It doesn't let you mutate variables. You don't know how to change the values. It has a grammar of its own. So normal languages would just have a for loop or a map reduce, but it has a very elaborate grammar that makes your programs concise. So if you read somebody else's Clojure code, you would not understand it because it might be using functions that you did not know existed. So you wrote something that took you 10 lines and somebody wrote the same thing in 2 lines and it's more efficient. That's very possible when you're writing Clojure. But it'll take some time. You'll get used to it. You'll learn how to pick the strings. Your fingers would hurt, but you learn how to play the guitar and then you can make music. With other languages, you're not learning how to play the guitar. You're just learning how to play a simple tone over and over again. That would be the difference.
I think that works. The problem now, the next problem I have here is I cannot hire anyone who writes Clojure.
Very good. Like, that's the biggest...
What do I do now?
Biggest problem.
You can convince me to write Clojure, but then what happens?
Yes, I think there are multiple facets to this problem. There's the fact that Clojure programmers are paid the most around the world.
Yeah, because there are like 4.
Yes. And I think the reason behind that is the amount of work that Clojure can produce per unit time is way more than any other language. I'm just considering if all developers were made equal, then this would be the case. I'm not saying that the experienced JavaScript developer would be less productive than an inexperienced Clojure developer.
Okay. Yeah.
Just assuming that all developers were made equal, then the amount of work that you can produce with Clojure is higher. The efficiency is higher, which makes a good business sense. So you have to sell it to people. First of all, you have to sell yourself. You have to learn how to get over the pain points. You have to set your toolings up. Maybe you have to set up Emacs. Like, this is Emacs. Like, who uses Emacs? So all Clojure people use Emacs, basically. Once you're done, once you're past that pain point, and if you are convinced you have a business case for that, then it's really easy to train people for Clojure. Because once you start writing Clojure, you start appreciating things that you did not know. Mutability is such. When your systems are mutable, you can be more confident compared to when your systems are typed. You cannot quantify that confidence, but you know that. I know that my programs will not break, or if they break, when they break, your programs will always break. When they break, I'll be easily able to fix them. But yeah, that's a problem. So what I did was, I started writing Clojure. I started giving talks about it. I have a blog and I write exclusively on Clojure and React now. And then I wrote a book so I could convince everybody around me to write Clojure. And when they ask me this question, I give them that book.
Okay.
So that's what I personally do. But the truth is that Clojure will never be mainstream. Nor would Haskell be. And not even F#. That's good for me personally. That means a very small group of people who are truly interested in building shit and who are truly interested in making sure that their work stays alive, only they would write Clojure. Which makes it very easy for me to hire. Because imagine if somebody would work just to get a job, they would not learn Clojure. But if somebody has spent the time to learn Clojure and is decent at it, that already tells me a lot about them. Or that's true for any functional language. Haskell, Reason, OCaml, F#. F# is a great language. Like if you are into TypeScript, F# would be a great addition. That's purely typed and also functional at the same time. And it runs on C#. So you get websites, you get desktop apps, you get web servers, front ends, everything.
Okay.
The best part I think about Clojure, I'll tell you the worst part. Like hiring is the worst part. The mindset you'll have to develop, that's the worst. Like it will pain you for a while that you cannot change variables. And that's painful. I do not want to go through that pain again. What else is bad? Clojure is a cult, bro.
Yeah. I think that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah. And I think I like it that way. Because the thought processes here are radical. That dude, like Rich Hickey went to a Ruby conference and told them that ORMs are not the right way to go about things. Like the people who invented Active Record, you go to their conference and you tell them that that's fucking stupid. So it's a cult in that sense that we reject the norms, the traditional ideas, but there is enough merit to it as well. Like Clojure, the community in general rejects testing. I do not reject testing at all, but the community in general would reject testing, and the community realizes that we have a sense that we do not need to test systems. There are reasons for that. Clojure as a community generally rejects static typing like TypeScript or Haskell, because they say that's what Haskell is for, that's what Go is for. If you're looking for speed, do you know what the REPL is by any chance? You know what a REPL is, like in general, like a Python or a JavaScript REPL. Shell, the Python can be interpreted.
Yeah.
So that's a shell. With all the Lisps, there is this thing called REPL. I don't think it's rightly worded. The term should be called a runtime bridge.
Okay.
Whatever Lisp you are typing. So Emacs is also a Lisp. Emacs is written in eLisp.
Okay.
Yeah, recursion everywhere. So a REPL is when you can connect your code to your runtime and execute it inline. That gives you the ability to develop functions and not care about your system. Is that making sense? I'll show you an article that I wrote that has a GIF of the REPL. Newline.co. I posted it on Hacker News.
When?
A few days ago, I don't know.
Did it get anywhere?
Yeah, I mean 4 or 5 likes maybe.
Oh.
I posted another one that reached the first page and that stayed there for a few hours.
Very nice, man.
And it has 9 comments. I did not know that.
There's an app, by the way, where you can get notified of Hacker News replies and comments. I signed up for it. I think because otherwise Hacker News has no way of knowing people replied to you, right?
I generally post one myself, or if somebody else posts about it, like posts about in my blogs, I generally get a notification of it, like somebody would inform me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, same happened. Like I have like messages of people.
So you see this my system is connected to a REPL and I can execute code in line.
Okay.
This is just a simple addition subtraction. You can also define functions. I don't know if I define that in this GIF. Okay, I'm defining a function right now. I'll write it down. I'll create something with it. The function is defined in this namespace and I can call it right here.
Okay.
I'm not leaving my editor.
How is this useful to you?
Okay, so what happens is that when you start building in the REPL, you don't need to get out of your system. So if you want to know what React looks like, you can just evaluate React in place. If you have a state somewhere, like in your Redux store, you evaluate your Redux store and see what your state looks like. Which also means that you can execute UI flows. So I have a native app, a React native app, and I'm dispatching events. And when I dispatch an event, that event is dispatched in the runtime. It's connected to the runtime.
Got it.
So I'm using the UI, but without touching the UI. I can also fill in forms. I can check my validation strategies. I can check my APIs in place.
What does this have to do with not testing it?
Yeah, nothing.
Okay.
The problem is that when you do this, you can test a lot of ideas in place
without having actual unit tests in place.
Yes, exactly. So you get that speed and you're confident that this would work. It's not the idea of not testing, I think somehow stems from the fact that you could test while you're building. And once you have this, I generally put this in my Git repo itself. So I put the UI flows with my source code. So as I'm building it, it stays in version history. And when I come back to that source after...
You can kind of test it by running all the UI
yes,
flows.
Yes. And I do not leave my code. I'm testing as I'm building the app.
Got it. Yeah.
And you don't need to touch the UI. So this is a real phone. I recorded the phone screen and then I put it on the system screen. And the good part is that all Lisps, like Emacs was written 50 years ago, Emacs has a REPL. I don't know why other languages do not have a REPL. They have a shell, but they call it a REPL. And I think the reason other languages cannot adopt a REPL is because of the syntax. The Clojure has a tree-formed syntax, so this is Clojure. That's how you parse it. But all other languages would need specialized parsers to convert it into a tree.
Yeah.
And it's not as straightforward as this would be. So that's a simplicity at the core. Your entire program is a map. Your entire program is a list. You can pick parts of the list, evaluate them. You can pick parts of the list, change them. So that you get that power, that simplicity that makes you faster, that lets you build simpler systems, and you ship faster. But you cannot hire people. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So. Let's get to the exact opposite of this, okay? Really quickly. The first sentence I said was, my laptop, by the way, is becoming troublesome now. And then you said, oh yeah, why did you buy it in India and blah, blah, blah. So I bought my laptop in July. When I started working full time, I was like, new company, new start, new laptop. Makes sense. I really wanted a 13-inch MacBook Pro, not a 16-inch MacBook Pro. That is just because pre-COVID, I was doing approximately one flight a month. In a year. And it just is so much simpler for me to carry a 13-inch laptop.
I think so.
Not just with flying, just with, work from home, go to co-working, blah, blah. If you have so like at work, I was working at a company in the Netherlands. Then I had like a 16-inch because it's just there. It's like a computer connected to displays and so on. But if you have to carry it, 13-inch is my thing.
Not worth it.
So I got a 13-inch Pro 2020 with the nicer keyboard and blah blah blah.
M1?
No. Before M1 existed, because I got it in July.
Okay.
Now the problem is the delivery times were very long because it was still like just 2-3 months after it launched. So my choices were wait for 4 weeks, and get 32 GB RAM or get 16 GB tomorrow. And me being me, I got the worst option, obviously. So, because I wanted it then, right? So that's why, by the way, like with the iPad also, it was like I could get it from Apple 2 weeks later or from Amazon tomorrow. What should I do? This time I actually got it from Apple because I basically wanted the engraving. And like I have it here. It's like really nice. I love the engraving.
Oh, on the system.
Yeah, you have engraving on the pencil and so if you buy something from Apple, you can get it engraved for free.
Can you put emojis as well?
You can put
With the
plain
color?
text or monocolor emoji.
Okay, that would be cool.
Yeah. Anyway, not important.
Yeah,
so I waited for 2 weeks this time, but for other stuff, I'm usually like, you know what, I'm gonna get from Amazon because I want it now. I'm like literally no joke. It's like you order in the morning, it's gonna be here before 9 p.m. tonight.
Yes.
It's crazy, right?
Yes.
We're getting there now. So
They do it, like, I appreciate and I'm really fascinated by it.
like the prediction part, right? Like they know I'm gonna buy it.
And they reach it. Like,
Yeah.
that is like fascinating in itself.
No, but by prediction, I mean prediction means it's in the warehouse next to my house already because I'm gonna buy it today. Not just they know what to show me; they've put it there next to my house. Anyway, digression. So now I will tell you a really funny story because on my Air before this, I was using 13 Air. Like the most expensive you can get, but it's still an Air. So top of the line is also not good, but it's even better for like traveling and going and so on. Running Visual Studio Code with Chrome in an Air is not a good idea because you're running multiple Chromiums, and with unfortunately the stack we have today, Stack, Notion, Airtable, Superhuman, everything is also running Chromium. It's like, let's not talk about Electron now.
That's my fourth podcast. I've invited
We'll
somebody.
talk about, you talk about Electron because that's like an entire thing I don't want to get into. Forget it.
Yeah, not
but so,
not
here,
this
anyway.
podcast.
So for my Air, what I did is, you can run Visual Studio Code in a server now.
Yeah.
So then now I only have one Chrome, which is essentially tunneling through a computer with more RAM, which is running Visual Studio Code in it. So for example, with GitHub Code Spaces or Code Sandbox, your IDE runs in the browser.
Do you see the complexity?
Like and then the best part is, let me just open it up because I don't want to lose the exact wording. But I wrote a really funny, I mean it's funny for me, but I don't think everyone else would find it funny.
I think
I wrote a tweet. I'm writing code on GitHub Code Spaces using Chrome. Code Spaces running Visual Studio Code on a server, which is using Electron, which is using Chrome. We've gone full circle. Anyway, so with my Air, the last couple of weeks, I actually exclusively used something called Gitpod, which is just another service which lets you like self-host VS Code in a server in Chrome, because I didn't want to run VS Code in my device. Obviously, now it's not the case with my Pro, but I started using a calendar app, which is I told you about it also. And some other things like work just became a lot more, so I need Notion open all the time. So I went from having about 2 to 3 average Electron apps open to about 4 or 5 all day open. And now my Pro is unable to handle it. So when I told you that I want a 10K budget to move in, I actually would rather get the device that is going to be launched in 2021, which should be my perfect device if it comes out. I will get it on day one. Would be a 14-inch M1 Pro with 32. That's the absolute minimum I would want to settle for. Ideally 64. Right?
This is JavaScript radicalism. When you go for easy upfront, then you have to support easy beyond the point where you can support it.
Sure.
And then you come up with tools
JavaScript is a metaphor for my RAM, I guess. Yeah. But so anyway.
You come up with tools like VS Code, you come up with tools like Electron because you want that ease. You want to get that experience without investing that time. Desktop apps are not hard. They're more efficient anyways. They're different than JavaScript, but they're not hard. And they're certainly not easy. They're simple, but not easy. So to remove that early learning
I would rather not write Objective-C to make a map app, right? Obviously.
Yes, but you would never achieve that experience.
Obviously.
Yeah,
also true. Like Electron apps are just
horrible. Like you had to buy a 16 GB
you have to
laptop.
buy a new laptop now
to run
your
Electron
apps don't
apps.
run.
You need a new tab to run Notion.
Electron is the whole thing. We're not going to get into that.
And when the momentum snowballs, you have a ton of people who can write JavaScript, and you come up with smart people who would build something like Electron. and then you
or
have
React Native or
React
like
Native,
just
and start marketing it. You take these two momentums, combine them, and the market is bombarded with substandard software which could have been great. Like, it solves a real problem. Like, Slack solves a real problem. Notion to a large extent solves a real problem.
And like Slack can afford to make a decent Mac app.
Yes, but they still don't do it because imagine the momentum that
And
is
the
behind
talent
JavaScript.
availability and everything.
I don't think they would care. Like, we are sitting in some co-working space talking about it. Slack is $1 billion company. They might have maybe a few thousand engineers.
I mean, Slack is Salesforce right now. It's like
yes,
it's crazy.
I mean,
No, Slack is owned by Salesforce now. I mean,
okay.
so now it's like, but anyway, but so they still choose by choice Electron.
Yes, they chose
Not,
Electron.
I chose it by compulsion,
And
right?
and they knew.
Yeah.
And they knew the limitations, and everybody realizes that Slack app is shit when you're using Electron. So is Discord. So I just run it in Chrome.
Yeah, I also like the whole time I was running progressive web apps pinned. So that just looks like a native app opens in its own browser, but it's a Chrome app.
Imagine is this the future?
By the way,
they
that
want
brings
to be?
me to the next thing, which is progressive web apps. Why aren't they here yet? I think that's such a good idea still. But anyway,
I'm not big on progressive web apps. I think if you want good experience, you have to go native, and people are realizing that.
sure, yeah.
Airbnb removed React Native.
Yeah, of course. Years ago, it was a big thing.
Yes, and
Fake.
the fact that they had to do it, and they are not even a tech company. Like, they are a tech company.
Sure,
I
I
would
know what
not.
you mean,
I'm
yeah.
not in a position to
Call them
talk.
no tech.
Yes,
Yeah.
talk about Airbnb and call them that they're not a tech company. But still, they are not a tech-heavy company. They're not like Gojek. They're not like Uber. They're not like Alphabet.
Koi.
They're not like Koi. They do not have to process the building plans. They do not have any AR or something. It's a glorified e-commerce, and they got rid of it. That means they know. I think e-commerce apps care the most about the user experience. They would be the first to adopt the Jamstack.
Yeah, because for them it's like
the
every
efficiency
millisecond
is
actually
money.
gets to like the $1 is probably not for Slack. Like they don't sell more subscriptions
Yes.
if they have a native app.
Yes.
Or anyone else really.
But the problem here is that we as a community, or I don't know if it was collective or some people pushed it, we thought that JavaScript is the way to go if you want to target multiple platforms. JavaScript in the sense browsers is the way to go. But when apps came around, that completely changed, because apps are more personal and people really can get the user experience that they desire. You can build a shitty app, like in the sense it's not optimized in the browser, it will run fine. You cannot
could
do
build
that.
a React Native app.
You can build a React Native app.
But so tell me this, now with M1 and running iOS apps on a Mac natively, or for example with
That's
Chromebooks
perfect, yes.
running Android apps natively on Chromebooks, that would be the ideal thing.
That
then,
would be
right?
ideal, but still
With,
there is a fragmentation, because you cannot write Swift on Windows laptops, or
Yeah,
you cannot
sure.
write Swift on Android.
Yeah. But that's like a business thing, not a tech thing, right?
Uh,
Like Apple can let you write Swift
For
on
the
Windows.
ideal developer experience, you should be able to write declarative UI that compiles to native, whatever the native
Like Catalina,
SDK is.
right? Or what is it called? Like the new UI design tool from Apple which works with Swift. Do you know?
No, I do not.
Google Catalina apps. So Catalina is, I think they changed the word now. It was called Catalina before.
Catalina
Okay, no, I'm
was,
saying Catalyst.
Okay.
That's the word, Catalyst. That's why I got confused. So Catalyst is Apple's UI framework, which is now, it's essentially a way to just like WYSIWYG it, which goes to Swift though. And then,
Yes,
so it's
I think
native.
they had it already.
It's like a React Native experience, but actually native, basically.
I think the closest we can get to native today is Qt.
What is Qt? Oh, Qt framework thingy. Yeah.
Qt
Qt.
framework.
Okay, that's how you pronounce it. Okay.
Some people call it Qt and some people call it Qt.
I've never heard it. I've only read it, so I always thought
That's the
Qt.
closest we can go to, but that's still not.
But that's still not native, right?
That's
But
still
so
not native.
this I love. Like I like the idea of
But it only runs on Mac.
Yeah, sure.
With that thing, the fact that you could run iPhone apps on a MacBook, that's great. I don't
And
think the
basically
reverse
what
is
you
true.
need is an iPad version of the app,
Yes.
which would be
With
perfect
scale.
for a Mac,
Yes,
right?
which would scale
Which
up
is what
and
people
down.
are doing now, right? Like the Twitter app and stuff is going to be they just ship the iPad app to the Mac App Store.
A lot of apps can do it. I think there's still a case for desktop apps like Notes, like IDEs. What else? Accounting software.
No, of course,
Excel
like
software.
or
There's
Excel is better on
desktop.
nobody wants to use iPad Excel on
Yeah.
a laptop.
Yeah.
But more and more of your time is spent in apps that the
That
iPad
can
version
be-
is better.
yeah,
Like no
iPad
joke,
or the phone.
like Notion on iPad, way better than Notion on Electron.
Because
Even
you
though,
can-
although
right.
Notion is a bad example because Notion is just I don't know.
It's a web view.
it's a
It
fake
looks like
app.
a web view.
But like other apps, just as an example, my favorite app on this is the Times. The New York Times app is like so good.
Is a native app.
It's a native app, but not really. So it's a native app, except it uses, let's say, data stores.
Okay.
So like, for example, the news comes as JSON objects, for example.
But
And
that's
then they
okay.
render it natively though.
Oh, yeah, that
But
would be a native
when you
app.
click on an article, it gives you the site in an iframe. So they kind of got the best of both worlds combined somehow. But from a UX perspective, this is
way better.
such a good iPad app.
Right.
Way better than New York Times on the web. Way
I
better
think-
than New York Times on the iPhone.
We pushed Electron and JavaScript down users' throats, and we forgot that we were just pushing it to them. We were forcing it onto them. And at some point of time, we forgot how to write native apps.
I mean, actually, that's not entirely true because I think with iOS especially, there are still so many good native apps versus on Mac where all the good apps are now Electron apps and they're not even good, right? Like there's so much, like on iOS, there are still people are motivated because you can earn money from iOS.
Yes.
On
it
Android,
works.
that's not always the case. Like you would earn significantly lesser, right? Android users are just not.
They don't pay.
Yeah, but like the GitHub app, they launched
Is native.
this month.
Yes.
No, this year. Really good app, uses all the JSON data, but everything is real native components. Works
I think
so well.
you would appreciate a native app because you could figure out the difference, but a
Yeah.
normal user would not know.
So
if
then a
it's
business
native app.
decision could be Electron it up.
But the point is that the user might not able to pinpoint the problem,
Yeah.
but they would know somewhere in the head that this app is slow.
Yeah. No, they feel so. If you ask a
Yeah.
non-technical manager who uses Slack every day, she knows Slack is slower on native than even on the browser sometimes, right? With the new React Slack and with the navbar, like the website is actually kind of decent now.
Yeah, because of the browser, you have so much juice in there.
Yeah. But anyway, so
I think that I have this line
there's a lot of things that are wrong in the JavaScript ecosystem.
because there's momentum, but there's no channelization of energy. You want to build everything,
But
and you
for
want to
many
rewrite
use
everything.
cases, it is still ideal. That's
If you
the
do
whole
not
thing.
know closure, then
Sure, okay, yeah.
So
if you don't
closure-
have like a year of free
Yes,
time kept
yes.
around, then it's still ideal.
Yes.
In my case today, I don't, right? So
if you spend that, so it would not take you an year.
Yeah.
If you were like learning from me, or if you were working with me, or if you had somebody in your team who knew closure. So I think you can learn it.
I'll buy a book.
25%.
So let's see what I can get from there.
You don't have to buy it pro.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like I can read your book and see. No, but yeah. So native is.
I think all of us have to get together, and we have to fight the urge to make easy things, and we have to realize that this is an art form.
But I think like you gave me like side note and hey people whoever is listening listen to other episodes of this podcast because you told me about the idea of let's say having JSON data which renders to real UI and so on. What I'm saying is the main problem is there is no language I can write in right now including Clojure which would let me do everything that JavaScript lets me do.
You don't have to. That is the good part.
But if I want to. Like I want to build a mobile app and I want to build a server and I want to build a web app and I want to build an IoT app and I want to build a little car app. I can only use JavaScript right now.
You can actually use ClojureScript because it compiles to JavaScript.
Okay, yeah, sure. That gives
yeah,
you a
that
lot
is
of
you're
freedom.
right. Yeah.
But
so
so
you can
that
only
would
use
basically
JavaScript.
compile to JavaScript, which will then
Yes.
compile to React Native or to the
Which is
browser or
worse.
whatever,
Which
which is
is
actually
worse.
one extra level of process.
Yes,
Which
which
kind
is
of brings me to Deno, because Deno is a runtime like Node.js, except Node.js is basically like you write JavaScript, it compiles to C, C++ and whatever, and you run the thing. Deno, you write TypeScript natively, and it compiles to Rust. So Deno is supposed to be much better than Node.
Why not write Rust directly?
Because you don't know how to write Rust, right?
But it's not hard to write
yeah,
Rust.
okay,
Hey,
but
Rust
I'm not arguing why Deno is good. I'm saying Deno lets me write with no changes, pure TypeScript, with some extra things that Rust can offer but JavaScript cannot. For example, like with like Go style imports, where import X from a URL, right? And so like JavaScript cannot do that, right? So there's no package.json, there's no npm support, there's no dependencies. You only write TypeScript like the language, like so JavaScript syntax, but it compiles to Rust and runs in Rust. So Deno then is quite promising if you want to not learn a new language, still write JavaScript.
I think
but slightly better.
We should stop the fact that people don't want to learn a new language, because I'm sure that there are a lot of people who realize the limitation of their toolkit and who are looking for a way out, who are looking at other options, who are looking at Haskell, who are looking at Clojure or Reason. And I'm sure that a lot of people would stick to their normal stack. But you should try to pick up people who will move.
Yeah, for sure.
And then they guide the system and hope there would be a momentum at some point.
It's just, I think the problem is that we've come so far.
Yes. And
that now JavaScript has to be the de facto language for the next decade.
Yeah.
There's so much of already. It's too big. It's almost like a sunken cost fallacy.
Yes.
Right? You've done so much of JavaScript that on Earth, I mean, not a developer, that we would rather spend money on making Electron faster so that it runs a bit better than building a native
UI,
app, right?
Yes.
Or like we're spending money on like GitHub code spaces or whatever, which would fire up VS Code in your browser so that you can quickly edit it, or use Code Sandbox, by the way, which is a company from my university. Very cool people. Like you do that because you don't want to run VS Code natively because it's so slow. But like, so you're optimizing
for ease. You're optimizing for people who do not know how to do shit. But that's not
but that's most people though.
Those people will grow up. Everybody would grow up, and you want them to grow up in a way where they become more, where their intelligence is enhanced. Their intelligence cannot be enhanced, obviously.
Knowledge, maybe.
Knowledge and the way of building things. If you spoon feed developers, they would want to be spoon fed. Like, this doesn't sound right when I say it, and it's a bit patronizing, but you have to let people figure out and research things and come to their own conclusions.
So why don't you make a PR and make the Clojure documentation better? Like, why does it have to be so shitty? The
documentation is not shitty if you read it.
Okay.
It's not as good compared to JavaScript.
So why not though?
Because the number of people who use ClojureScript tend to read the code first. The problem here is that most people would not start with Clojure as their first language. There would be people who realize there's some problem with their toolkit and they'll get into it. But they'll get it at their own cost. So they don't know how to get into languages. Like, in the sense, they do not have the beginner's mindset. They're somebody who already have a problem, and they would solve that problem. And it would be easier for them to read the code than to watch videos or to read documentation. So it's not meant for junior developers at all.
So, but my whole problem is we're not there yet, right? I cannot write a JSON UI and have it work properly on native.
So about the JSON UI, we did not talk about this.
No, we don't. We're not allowed to, right?
No, we can talk about this. Like, we did not.
Yeah, but there's an episode though, right? In the works. If not, it's ready yet.
The episode is about React Native.
Okay,
but
sure.
I think that makes sense to go in the JSON.
Yeah. But so just as an example, right? These apps, if you have any, the native new apps like this podcast app, the new music app, these are actually Catalyst apps.
Yes.
So that's awesome.
And this is a shitty React Native app that I use to transfer data from my Android phone.
Because Apple.
Yes. And I can tell this, I do not like the experience. I like the experience of the Mail app.
Or like the Stocks app, by the way, and the Weather app. They're like very good apps. So here's the thing, right? Now, you can learn Swift with Catalyst or with whatever Swift UI, and target iOS and all Apple devices today. You can actually write once, run everywhere natively
for Apple,
but only in the Apple ecosystem.
Yes, and I can do the same for Android.
If there was
with Compose.
With Compose.
Kotlin Compose.
Okay.
Android
that
and
runs
Windows. And also Mac.
That runs Windows natively though.
Yes. So Kotlin Compose, I don't know if that is the name of the framework.
Okay.
But there's something with Kotlin.
Is it like Qt or is it
so Qt is
more
it's
native?
It's a more native, like
but it's not
true native.
Catalyst native, I would say.
But it'll use Coca
But
framework.
it's close.
No,
it'll directly use Coca.
It'll use
then.
Coca framework.
Okay.
So it would be the elements that are rendered would be native, and you could make Android apps, you could make Windows apps, desktop Windows apps, desktop Mac apps, and normal Android apps. Also, like normal.
But like,
web,
what about like
iOS
Flutter,
apps.
for example?
Flutter is like React Native.
No, it's not.
It's being sold.
It's
as
lower.
I think it's being sold as a step up. I would
or
say
a step down.
Yeah,
depending on how you describe it. I mean lower as in more native than React Native.
I checked a few apps. Google Pay is one of the flagship Flutter apps, and I can tell that it's not native.
Okay.
But I have a developer's perspective.
Sure.
But it's not native.
It's like if React Native is here and Catalyst is here, it's in
Somewhere
the middle
in
maybe. And then like Ionic framework is probably even higher than React Native.
Yeah. I think it's not possible to match native performance.
Yes, but so that's what I'm saying, right? With the Apple ecosystem, today you can actually get right ones run everywhere.
But only
on
with
native.
Apple.
Yeah.
That's
with
just
Apple.
20% of the ecosystem. The entire
Yeah, but
world.
80% of the money, by the way. 80% of the mobile revenue and 20% of the mobile users.
I think revenue in terms of internet companies, it's not guided by the actual money, but the volume of users.
No, that's not the case.
But
Google pays billions of dollars every year to Apple to be the default search engine, because people who search for things on Google on an iPhone are 10 times more worthy. Like just the pay per click of an iOS user is approximately 10 times worth of an Android user. That's just because you're spending money on a $1,500 phone and not a $150 phone, and so you would buy more and blah blah blah. And like the math works. It's true. It's not just like a thing. Anyway, so
coming back,
what do we do now? Like where do we do? What do we do?
As individuals, I don't think there's much.
No, but like, can Apple and Google, like they made the COVID app, can they come together and make one framework that works everywhere?
Ideally,
Is it even possible on a technical level that something can run natively on, let's say, a Java, whatever, Kotlin Android, and like an Objective-C Swift iOS? Is this even theoretically doable?
Instead of asking a complex question like this, we should go to the root principles. We should think in first principles. If we have just plain data, just plain text, it's really easy to work with across platforms. If you were to just build a text editor app, not a text editor, just a text display app, and it's really easy to do it, right? Now think of the objects of a native platform, the button, the window, the top pane as data. So if you could define your entire window as a JSON object, and you could create a compiler to render those.
Or just take JSON in and spit out, let's say, SwiftUI or something.
Yes. And this is possible with SwiftUI. So SwiftUI says that it is declarative, but it is not. You're still writing Swift. There's still state involved. So although it is way more declarative than something like Angular or Svelte, but it is not truly declarative unless it is data. So I think that at some point of time, somebody will come up with a system that lets you write UIs as JSON, and you'll treat the native SDKs as assembly language.
I would just say type button, label hello, and then that would translate to a button which says hello.
Depending on the platform.
Language.
Yes. So
it would be a blue button on iOS, a white button on Android, whatever.
And like using native SDKs.
Yeah. But so if I have a React Native app today where I say top nav, like a real thing, and I say title, close top nav, in UI it renders to looking like Android and looking like iOS.
But sometimes it also renders as a real component, but you'll then have to write the actual platform specific code.
Yeah, underline. Like you can link.
The problem is that when you're
but I'm saying, can I parse that and then convert it to SwiftUI? Rather than writing it in...
Why do you want to?
Yeah, that's true. Why?
Data is easier. Yes. If you combine two pieces of data, you get data. If you combine two pieces of machines, you get complexity. JSON plus JSON is JSON. But
But
code
so
plus
it
code
doesn't
is not
sound that
code.
hard to build.
Yeah, it doesn't. Like, especially for Swift, it doesn't. You again come back to root principles. What is a UI? A UI is state, UI is side effects, and the UI is a view.
Have you looked at Alpine?
Alpine.js, yes.
What do you think?
I have not used it.
But what do you think of it?
I don't think highly of JS frameworks anymore.
No, but the ideas behind it.
I don't know the idea. What is the idea?
Google it really quickly. Because I think if you have an Alpine-like thing in JSON, so Alpine would help you do the state stuff and mutations, but writing it as data. So if I translate this to JSON, that type button has data open false,
Okay, maybe.
button on click open true, and then I can actually take that JSON and convert it to Alpine JavaScript code, which Alpine would convert it to browser, right? I'm saying let's build one level over Alpine, and then I could do that with JSON, and then instead of Alpine, I would just compile it also to Swift UI and
But
so on.
Alpine lets you write functions.
In the text, I'm not saying Alpine is good, but I'm saying the ideas it has. That with
Yeah.
data attributes you could
Yes.
basically have all
But
the reactive and
instead
state
of
management.
XML, we just do JSON.
JSON,
Just
exactly.
pure JSON. We have a JSON schema defined for views, and then we compile it down.
And
to
you can
Swift.
have like if logged in, show this one, else
no
show this
if
one.
else, no bro.
Then
no
how
if
do you
else.
do the
Only
state
reactivity.
management? Okay.
We have to be reactive, like truly reactive.
So you're saying on login, I would set something which would run.
There has to be.
Tell me what
initial side
would
effect.
your specification look like for if I click this button, this should happen.
That's a very good question. I did not think about it.
Okay, I thought you thought about it.
I just thought about, so that's a side effect. I thought about state and the actual representation. So actual representation is really easy. We are already doing it using XML. You just do it in JSON.
Sure.
State is also easy because imagine you have an RX stream running somewhere, and you can have something like Kafka topics, and every variable that changes across your app is a topic.
You just listen to it.
Yes, you just listen to it. You just write whatever the state is.
But how do you mutate your state in this case?
Yes, that is the problem. So you'll have to have an output stream as well. So you have an input stream and you have an output stream.
So the mutations would happen between
Outside.
that.
So the mutations would happen outside the JSON. If I were to build it in a few days, what I would do is have a JSON with start with a view.
So essentially the JSON is dynamically generated. Is what you mean.
No. So you write JSON. So if you have a button and you have
Let's have a button
form
which
field
says hello,
and a
I
form
want
field.
if you click on the button, it should say world. Now how do I build that?
So that world would be an input RX stream.
Okay.
That would react to whatever the changes are. So there would be a stream, there would be a topic that would say button label,
Yeah.
and you just render the button label on the button.
Yes.
Okay.
But how
And
do
on
I
click
yeah.
of the button, so you'll have an on click key
like a
value
dispatcher.
there. Yes, and but that will not be a functional dispatch. You do not write a function there.
Yeah, but you would just say dispatch change
the
it to
value.
world.
Dispatch the value of a form, right, or a static value, and that will go out in another queue. That would be an so there's an inward queue for the changes
I
in the
understand.
app, and there would be an output queue, and somebody would process that queue outside the scope of the UI. So that would be native Swift. I think the worst part is that would be JavaScript. That's Qt basically. Qt does that. There's a language called QML, and lets you define your UI as JSON-like structures, and then they do the same thing. It's like similar stuff, and you can handle these side effects using JavaScript. But I would, if I were to write it.
But then I obviously don't want to write Kotlin and Swift like React Native does, right? Now write some native to make it work properly. I don't want to do that.
I think in
So
that
what do we
sense,
do?
Go would be ideal because it compiles to native C++ code. Like it can produce objects. So you write something similar to Go, or
You just
can
basically
even
ship
have-
the Go executable with the UI and then
You don't
let
even
the
need the Go executable because Swift can run Go with that.
okay.
And so
Sure.
can Android.
Okay, cool.
So you build it, you compile it, it goes inside your app. You have queues everywhere, in and out. And I think this will not happen. Right? This is an ideal world. This is utopia. And this should not happen. We should go ahead and go back to native applications and figure out a way to write it easily. It'll cost more, obviously, and everybody would not do it. If you are a startup,
But it's
you would
just
have to do
pointless
React Native.
to write natively for 2 platforms, right? Why not work on this? Like, what's the benefit of writing natively if I can generate native code from writing whatever?
You'll have to spend a lot of time and handle edge cases.
That's true.
And if you're in an integrations company, you are driven by the vendors, basically.
Like, let me give you an example, right? I have this app which I used on my iPhone for like many years, and then I downloaded it here. It's called Hackers. It's my favorite Hacker News client. So it's basically like an RSS reader, right? So it shows you a list of things.
And
You click on it, you show you the comments. You click on this, it opens the whatever native browser and shows you the stuff. This is, I think, can be built with a JSON flow.
Yes.
Easily.
Yes.
You click.
Because
you
there are
see,
no side effects.
Yeah, it's super basic. So this would be the, like, for a proof of concept, I think this can easily be built with one JSON file.
Yes.
But yeah, there's a lot of edge
There are edge
cases which
cases.
you would not want to then handle. And
How do you handle animations?
Yeah.
It's next
like,
to impossible
yeah.
if you're not writing or like imperative code.
Yeah. Or you would just be really opinionated, and then you'd have to say open with slide, right?
Yeah.
And then it just becomes way too opinionated, right?
Yes,
then all the
and
edge
it
cases are
becomes
even
bootstrap. Like bootstrap.
worse. Or like Tailwind even.
But Tailwind is less opinionated.
Yeah, slightly. But it actually becomes Svelte a lot more, because Svelte does a really good job hiding away these abstractions and saying things like click this button and fade it in. Even Vue does a good job with that.
It would be similar to Svelte or Vue without the extra syntax. Just JSON.
Yeah. But so if I could take JSON and compile it to Svelte, right? Or compile it to just HTML, CSS, JavaScript, that's just one other platform that you can target with your basic JSON data, right? Basically, if I have one JSON file, which is your profile, name, address, whatever, save button. When you save, go to this API and save it. This can be one JSON file, which can then be compiled to web, which is native HTML, CSS, JavaScript. It can be compiled
Or
to Android,
React,
iOS,
Vue, Svelte,
everything.
Or Swift
And so
UI.
that's like the that's like truly write once, run everywhere.
Yes.
It's like the purest write once, run everywhere it can be.
But the problem here is that you always need side effects. So you will need some form of programming. Everything cannot be pure data in a real world.
I mean, RX stuff.
Even then,
they say that.
Even then, you would need to hook up the endpoints of the queue. So this is Clojure. This is where Clojure would shine. Clojure is a hosted language, which means it runs on Java, it runs on JavaScript, it runs on C#, it runs on Go. Now somebody would come up with a Swift implementation of Clojure, and somebody would come up with an Android Kotlin implementation of Clojure. Somebody would come up with a C implementation of Clojure. Same API, but compiles to different platforms. And that would be true native. I think that is the world dominance plan for Clojure.
Yeah, but that's like treating Clojure as syntactic sugar almost.
But it is syntactic. Syntactic sugar is
But
not
more
the
like
right word.
more like
Vocabulary.
yeah, sure.
So like alphabets, you need alphabets.
Like Clojure compiles to the actual language it's running in.
And that's what
And the
Clojure
idea is you don't let people write the actual language because they'll make more mistakes writing it.
No, because the actual language is not as nice to write because it's mutable and it has to be mutable. Like the machine has to be mutable. Assembly has to be mutable. It cannot be otherwise. But
I
we
mean,
can think.
bits have to change.
Yes.
Like on a fundamental level.
Yeah. Otherwise, it won't work. So at the lowest level, mutation is required as necessary. But at the level of thought, we do not need mutation. So we have to create.
Yeah, but Clojure is more than just no mutation.
Yes, way more than that. Clojure is a vocabulary. So think of an elaborate vocabulary to create. The alphabets would be the best way to go about it. So if you don't have alphabets, you cannot create words. If you cannot create words, then you cannot create a language, a script. So something like JavaScript is something like English. It's spread. It is being used everywhere. Not the ideal language, not the most complete. It has a lot of flaws, but it is still the language that is understood everywhere in this world. In that sense, Clojure would be Sanskrit or Tamil. pure,
pure,
in that
but
sense.
nobody wants to learn it.
Yeah, because it's hard.
Yeah,
But
and the
then you
people
read
who
the
are writing it
benefits.
are dead.
I think, yeah, Sanskrit would be
It's actually
Haskell.
Yeah, maybe. And
Yeah.
Clojure is more
A little less than
a
Sanskrit.
little
Some
bit of
form of
Sanskrit and
Russian.
Hindi combined or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Tamil is also a very strong script in that sense. Tamil, and I'm not sure. I'm not a linguist, but I think Tamil. Some parts of Russian scripts are also very purist in that sense. They evolved from Sanskrit.